So the story we learn about in our 36th class together is entitled From the Era of Good Feelings to the Politics of Division. And this might shock you, but there was a stretch of time that in politics, people got along and cooperated. Didn't last for long. It disintegrated into this contentious, divisive political world that we are obviously living in today. And I started off class with a philosophical question, easy for a high school student. And I say it's easy for a high school student because in adolescence, your friend group is hugely important. You know that, and I know that. And the question I posed, what is at the root of friendship and good positive feelings toward each other? And people say, well, common interests, common values, personality traits, honesty, trustworthy, loyal, funny, this sort of thing. And I hope you have good friends. I do. And here's the reality of things. Some of your friends come and go. Your friend now might not be your friend next year, 5 years, or whatever. Some friends are synonymous with certain times in your life. You might be friends with somebody as a kid, but not as an adult, or as an adult and not a kid. Some friends are synonymous with certain areas of your life, like your workmate friends and your college friends and your high school friends. Here's me fishing with my work friends. I mean, they're good friends outside of work, obviously because we're outside of work, but I associate these guys with my work friends. I would call them my work friends. And some friends are lifetime friends, so friendship comes and go. I think you can get that point. And then the converse of this, what causes us to be adversaries? What is at the root of adversaries and bad negative feelings toward others and falling outs? That's a slang term, but I had a falling out with them. You used to be good, you're not so good anymore. Frenemies, I love that term, where you're back and forth. You're friends, you get into a fight, you hate each other for a while, you make up, you're friends again, you have another fight. That happens. That rivals, there's certain people that maybe aren't enemies, but they're the people you want to defeat, maybe in sports or academics or something. There's people that you argue with, or creating the other, saying, hey, that is not me. I am the opposite of that person. So this human psychology applies to all areas, including history and including politics. So hopefully you get that philosophical understanding before we get into the history. So if I scale it up to politics, okay? The elephant, the symbol of the GOP, Grand Old Party, or the Republican Party, and the donkey, the symbol of the Democratic Party. And there are certain issues where they get very contentious. Abortion, gun control, fiscal spending, what we're going to spend our money on, separation of church and state, international policies, how should America operate in the world, domestic policies. These sorts of things can be very, very contentious. And as I speak to you, in my lifetime at least, it's never been this contentious. And I don't know if there's hope that they can find some common ground and cooperate and make some friends, or is it going to be adversarial and ugly? So in modern times, obviously, it's ugly. And the story I'm about to tell you now is when it was good and it disintegrated into ugliness, okay? So the era of good feelings. This was a period from 1817 to 1823 in which the decline of the Federalists enabled the Democratic Republicans to govern in a spirit of seemingly non-partisan harmony. Now, if you don't know the word non-partisan, that means I am not following the party line, okay? I'm just going to, hey, I'm not seeing you as this party or that party. I see you as a human being, and we can work together. Compared to partisan politics, for instance, in modern times, all the Republicans vote this way in the Senate, all the Democrats vote this way in the Senate. So there was a period where people were on the same page. But here's what, and part of this is the Supreme Court really solidified its place in three major precedents, the Dartmouth College versus Woodward, and the Dartmouth College case set up the concept of a private charitable organization in United States constitutional law. This case is still referenced today as the basis for protection of corporate persons under the Constitution. Big case, McCulloch versus Maryland. This case defined the scope of the U.S. Congress's legislative power and how it relates to the powers of American state legislators. Here's a real high-end analogy. What Marbury versus Madison was to the judiciary branch, McCulloch versus Maryland was to the legislative branch, really defining one of the branches of government's roles. And that's important. That's a big precedent right there. Then we have Gibbons versus Ogden, and this precedent established the principle that states cannot, by legislative enactment, interfere with the power of Congress to regulate commerce. So during this period, we have three big precedents that established this country for what it is. Okay, so that's part of this era of good feelings, those three precedents. and the Missouri Compromise. There's the word compromise, where two sides can, walk away from the table feeling okay about it. And this is, you can see slavery just, lingering, just not lingering, but festering. It's like you're just waiting for that little ember to ignite. But they delayed it until 1861 with our Civil War. And the Missouri Compromise was United States federal legislation that compromised Northern attempts to completely get rid of slavery's expansion by admitting Missouri as a slave state and Maine as a free state, in exchange for legislation which prohibited slavery in those remaining Louisiana Purchase lands. So this issue of slavery actually was put on the back burner, and it didn't become super contentious because they said, hey, listen, let's even it out. Missouri, slave state, Maine, free state, and we can delay the inevitable. But they didn't think of it at that point. Again, part of this era of good feelings. 3 cases and this compromise. Okay, so things start getting ugly in 1824. And if you were absent, we watched this 3-minute video, so please check that out. It's on Google Classroom. It's on here as well. And things get ugly, okay? So we have 4 people running for president: Jackson, Adams, Crawford, and Clay, okay? Now, Adams won, John Quincy Adams. Yes, that's John Adams' son, by the way, John Quincy Adams. I call him JQA. It's simpler and it sounds cool. JQA sounds good. So at this point, Adams wins, but he didn't have the majority of the electoral votes, nor did he have the popular vote. Andrew Jackson did. And what happened was, in our Constitution, if there's not enough electoral votes for anybody, it goes to the House of Reps. Now, this guy here, Clay, and you can see he came in last place. He convinced his friends in the House to vote for Adams, okay, instead of Jackson, who has more stuff, as you can see, more popular votes, more electoral college votes. So John Adams wins. Now, Jackson was absolutely livid and said, this was a corrupt bargain. You, behind my back, you stabbed me in the back, took over power, and he felt it was very wrong. This is the beginning of the ugliness. And when you feel ganged up on, it causes anger and hurt feelings. I don't care if this is history or middle school, okay? So that's what happened. So Adams and Clay, because Adams took Clay as a Secretary of State, which was really a stepping stone to being president at that time, they came up with a program of government subsidies to improve roads and canals to foster economic growth and protect domestic manufacturers from foreign competition in the form of tariffs. Now, JQA envisioned a national marketplace in which North and South, town and country were tied together by trade and exchange. In other words, big national government. And again, Jackson's still hanging out there. He's feeling very hurt. So what he does is he remains political and eventually wins at the next election of 1828. And from that fallout I just described, we have 2 parties. We have the Whig Party that was formed in support of the Adams-Clay American system, which I just described here. That's the American system, and was first known as the National Republicans, became the Whig Party in the 1830s in opposition to Jacksonian Democrats. And then you have the Democratic Party with Jefferson and Jackson that favored state rights and limited role of federal government, especially in economic affairs. Now, here's the confusing part. The Democratic Party of the time is almost the opposite of the modern Democratic parties. So let me really simplify it. Big, strong national government, national scale, modern Democrats. More rights to the states, modern Republicans, but it's reverse here, okay? So 2 parties emerged, and we haven't turned back since. We have not turned back since. So let's go full circle as we wrap up. There have been political eras of cooperation and unity and times of contention and disunity. Presently, we're obviously in the latter of the 2. We'll get into that in more detail at the end of this class before your test, as we get into modern times. Often the reasons are the same for disunity: political gain. I'm going to do what I have to do to get political gain. Serious issues too contentious to find common ground. It's very difficult with certain issues to find a common ground. If you have a tax policy, you can probably talk about that without a whole lot of emotion. You talk about guns and abortion, that's a toughie. That's a toughie. And personal attacks. Okay? Now, when politics create this tribalism, I will only side with my side, instead of even listening to the other side or working with the other side, generally bad things happen. Okay? So that's the story in class. And we wrapped up with these questions. They are on Google Classroom. And I'm asking you to explain briefly the significance of those 3 precedents, and then putting your nose into the book about the Missouri Compromise and the era of good feelings and how it ended. All right, so that is that, and I appreciate you watching.